In this episode of Entreprenetics, we're going to talk about your most valuable startup or business asset. And as a venture capitalist, I've spent time looking at startups from a perspective of whether I should invest. And when I get to the point of wanting to invest, and what I usually do is do a valuation analysis, what the company should be valued at based on its life cycle. But in reality, you know what? All those numbers are meaningless to some extent, because at the end of the day, the most valuable asset, and you hear people talk about this all the time, but most of them really don't mean it. The most valuable asset is right here, right between my fingers here. It's your brain. So I was walking one day, and usually when I walk, I either think about things, because then I don't have any interruptions, or I study complexity science. So I'll be walking down the path and I'll be looking at some videos on complexity science. And one of the things that I was looking at was growth curves and interest rates and all that. And I'm going to go through something with you that kind of really triggered me to think of things in a different way. And really, when you look at any business, you're looking at the assets like machinery, inventory and all that. But in reality, your most important asset is your brain. Now, if you look at your brain as an asset, the most important one, then you can actually do some funny math, really cool math, and look at it from a perspective of money. So obviously, money is an asset, and as you go through the years, the value of money obviously diminishes if you don't reinvest it because of inflation. But if you look at the money formula, is that you can, let's say that the X equals money, and let's say that the some rate is interest that you're going to make on that money, and for this particular purpose, let's just say it's 10% per year. Now, if you can find 10% per year, that's basically good for you. The reality is that if you go to a bank and you put your money in, it's going to be substantially lower. So if you use the formula of X, 1 plus 10% to some time function, in this case it's, let's just call it 1 year, you're going to get your number. And so if you go and you look at it, and we're going to go 5 iterations because I want to show you the meaning of this, because it's very important for you to see the differential. So if you use this formula, you're going to do the following. You're going to go 100 times 1 plus 0.10 equals 110. And then if you keep that money, obviously for the second year, you're going to go 110 times 1 plus 10% equals 121. And then you're going to do, once again, you're going to keep your money in the account. You're going to do the same thing. And in this case, it's going to be 133.1, and you're going to use that $133.1, do the same thing again, and it's going to be 146.41, and you're going to take your 146.41, and now what you're going to do is you're going to get 161.05. Now, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Now, you put in 100, 5 years later, that money, at 10%, got you 161. But if you took, you could look at it from that perspective. You kept the money in. Now, what if you took the $10 out every time you made it? So basically, you have 10 bucks, 10 bucks, 10 bucks, 10 bucks, 10 bucks. When you look at these 5 years, at the end, 161.05, and obviously you took $10 out every year, so it's $50, plus you're left with $100, $150. So the differential is $11.05 between the two ways of doing it. Of course, I'm taking money out, those $10, so you probably lost it or you used it on something else like going to lunch. So you may not even have these $50, but it just shows you the power of compounded rate. And there's a point to this when it comes to your brain. I'll get to it, but it's very important that you see the power of compounded rate. So what happens is, what if you go to the other extent of 10 years? And if I'm going to use a simple formula, which you get from finance, which is X times 1 plus interest to the T. So in this case, I could have just used this formula to show it to you, but I wanted to have you look at it and see the power of compounding, even at 5 years versus just taking the $10 out and leaving the 100 every time. So there is a difference, obviously, but compounding really works when you start increasing the length of years. So in this case, if I choose, let's say 10 years, and I'm still at $100, 1 plus 10% as here, 10 years, my answer is going to be for 10 years is going to be 259.37. And if I took $10 out every time, so it's still, I took out $100 over 10 years, plus I had $100. Now what I did with the $10 per year, I don't know, you probably spent it on something. Maybe you invested it and you started making more money on it. But in reality is that the differential is still 59.37. Now you could also look at it from a different perspective. There's two other variables you could do. What if, in this case, what if we looked at it even longer term, 20 years? So at 20 years, at 10%, it's going to be, and I'll do the math just to make sure that I'm right. So 1.1 y to the x 20 times 100. Now it's $672.75. And if I did the same formula, linear formula here where I took the money out, I would have $200 plus $100. And so, and if I just kept those $10 out, you know, good luck, right? Then your differential starts increasing. So your differential is $372.75. So now the big question, you can play a math game here in terms of the asset, and you can look at it and say, what if I could magically create a return of 25% as an example? So now I'm looking at 100 times 1.2, and let's just say it's 10 years. So you could say for 10 years, 1.2 y to the x times 10 years times 100. So now it's 619 over 10 years, and it's 17 cents. And if you go back and you look at it, 1.1 over 10 years, that was 259.37. That's a huge differential. Now, why did we go through this math looking at your dollar and trying to figure out your interest rate? Because in reality, as I was walking, I started playing some numbers in my head in terms of the most valuable asset, which is your brain. So if you look at your brain as an asset, most valuable asset, and I'm not even talking about the compounded effect of having a team of 3 people and doing the multiplier of that. I'm just going to keep it simple. So now you can look at it from a different perspective. If whatever you're doing, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're learning a new craft, if you devote to learning something passionately for X amount of time, what's going to happen is you can look at your brain times 1 plus whatever the percentage in improvement. Let's just say you're improving at 10% to every year, t equals 1. Now what's going to happen is that as you improve on your knowledge and you continue to improve on it, the big point I want to give you is that it becomes a compounded game. So your brain, think of it as a nonlinear computer. Now you're learning stuff, and what's happening is that as you learn it, your brain becomes more valuable. Now the key is this part. How quickly can you learn something where it's going to give you an exponential formula in terms of your knowledge? Because in reality what happens is that your knowledge is exponential. And that's what people forget. And so when you look at your brain, you know, how you learn things or what you apply your learning to, it becomes very powerful because you're building on certain things. And this is the key to this entire lesson I want to get to you, is that you have to learn the fundamentals. So what you're doing is you're building on F1, F2, F3, F4. So whatever the field is, whatever the topic is, let's say you want to learn how to become a better entrepreneur. So as you're learning through your experience and continuous learning by sharing your knowledge with other people, reading about how other people made it, learning the new practices and all that, you're learning the key fundamentals. And then what happens is when you learn enough of the fundamentals, then it becomes the art of the nuance. And I can tell you, I know this, being an entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and an athlete, is that nuance does come into effect. And what I mean by that is when you have a certain amount of fundamental knowledge on something. Let's say you want to be a great programmer, or you want to learn how to sell better, or you want to be a better marketer. Once you truly understand the fundamentals, and this is why all great athletes, if you look at any great world-class athlete in any sport, you will see that even on a daily basis they practice the art of the fundamentals. Because what happens is once you have fundamentals come into play, what happens is that fundamentals lead to nuance. And nuance is where you become world class. So what you should do, whatever you're doing, whether you want to be a great designer of iPhone apps, whether you want to be a great salesperson, a great business strategist, if you truly focus on learning the fundamentals of it and look at it from every angle, then you're going to get to the point of being able to see the slight variations of the fundamentals that make people great at what they do. And that is the whole point of this entire exercise I went through, is because I want you to look at your brain as your most valuable asset. So what you're going to find out is that the combination of all the intellectual brains that's around you, on your team, in your startup, in your growing companies, is what's going to matter on Wall Street. The digital component of all these industries coming into play makes everything become intangible. And of course, when things get intangible, as you go from analog to digital, is that the most valuable asset is your brain. Because your brain is the most intangible asset you could ever have. So that's what I wanted to show you, is that the power of looking at the formula, the finance formula, where you have a compounded interest playing out, is the same way with your brain. So what happens is that you see entrepreneurs, as an example, rise, they make their money, and then they disappear. And then you see some entrepreneurs, they continue to rise, maybe they have some hiccups, they continue to rise and so on, and they make entrepreneurship their career, which means that they go from startup to being acquired, to go on IPO and so on. But bottom line is that if you look at it from their perspective, what they've done is they've increased their intellectual capacity through learning. And the way you can learn, obviously, is through self-education, for one. You can also go to school and learn about stuff. But also a very powerful way to learn is from the market. So keep in mind that if you continue to look at your brain as an asset, the most valuable asset, then what you need to do is continuously educate yourself in your market as well as other markets, and allow your people to spend some time learning from the market, from each other, and self-learning, self-educating themselves in the passions that they're really passionate about. Until next time.